everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on episodes 10 through 12 of Kuroko no Basketball, or Kuroko's Basketball, and man, these episodes have been so good. We're only 9 episodes in, and it's really, really good. I'm having so much fun with this series, and we're getting into like all of these games. We're getting into more character dynamics. We've only met 2 of the Generation of Miracle players, but oddly enough, we've already met 2 of the Generation of Miracle players, so it's kind of crazy. But I'm really, really excited to see what's going to happen in these episodes, but I have quite a few comments to get to before we start these 3, so I want to get to them, and there's several things within them that I want to talk about. And so, first of all, AZ noted that 6 of the 7 OPs are sung by Taniyama Kisho, who is Chuya or Jean's VA. I was like, hell yeah, does that mean Grand Rodeo is doing these? Does that mean Grand Rodeo is doing some of the OPs? I'm like, I'm kind of all about that. So that's really exciting. And in the same vein, it was also said by Bella Roll that Takao's voice actor, Takao is the one that was hauling Midorima around in the cart that apparently is like a fan favorite, but I don't want to know why. We'll keep that a surprise. But apparently is a fan favorite. But their voice actor sings some of the OPs and EDs as well. And I'm like, okay, that's good to know. But along those same lines, Midoriya, if we're talking about voice actors, Ifat Suhi, hopefully I said that, did not butcher it entirely, said that Midorima's VA is the same as Erwin Smith from Attack on Titan and Sebastian from Black Butler, and realizing that Erwin Smith and Sebastian have the same voice actor made my day, because I love Erwin Smith in Attack on Titan. He's one of my favorites. I was like, are you joking? And so the fact that Midorima plays him now, I'm just going to, now I will just picture him looking down at Kuroko like he's Levi, and that's all I'm going to think about. So maybe there can be some shipping elements there. Maybe that will help get me there in Kuroko's harem. So I really loved finding that out. But also, Takao, who is the one that sings some of the OP and EDs, and that is Midorima's teammate, also is the same voice actor as Makoto from Free. And I was like, oh my god! And Bon from 7 Deadly Sins. And I was like, so Bon and Makoto have the same voice actor. Well, Bon's like the one good character in that series. So I'm not gonna talk 7 Deadly Sins. Not in this video. But I do like Bon from that series. He's like my favorite in that series. So that's good to note. But yeah, who knew? So yeah, I thought that was really, really interesting. So thank you all for the VA updates. I'm really happy about those. Bronze Manticore was talking about how Izuki and the whole thing with the puns that Izuki uses really make the most sense if you are a Japanese speaker. When you try to, and that totally makes sense. When you try to translate any puns or idioms from one language to another, as an English major, it's so hard, right? Because anytime you do any type of translation, there is going to be meaning lost, because in any language, there are certain words that carry a meaning that sometimes another language doesn't have a word for it. And that's so, I could English nerd out all day about the concept that a language has an emotion or a word that cannot be translated into another language. And that's just mind-boggling to me, because I'm like, no, there should be a word for it, right? But sometimes there isn't. And it's like, what do we do with that? So what can we do? But apparently, like Japanese, for instance, steak is suteki, but stuteki means something good. So there's kind of like a pun played on that in episode 5. And then panda, a pan is bread, so there's a pun with that. So it's kind of like if you were a Japanese native speaker, the puns would be really funny, but if trying to translate it to English, it loses some of the humor, because the puns are based on the language and the structure of the word itself, which when you translate it to another word, loses that. So I'm not going to geek out anymore on linguistics in this video either. So, but I thought that was really cool, Bronze Manticore, and I'm glad you brought that up. Moth Green Applesauce talked about how that there's kind of like a keeper, so to speak, of the Generation of Miracles. Like Takao is the keeper of Midorima, and Kasamatsu is the keeper of Kisei. But oddly enough, Kuroko's kind of the keeper of Kagami. So it kind of goes back to what Kisei was saying about Kagami potentially being like akin to a miracle himself. So Kuroko being the keeper of him is rather interesting. I don't know what to make of that, but I thought that was really interesting. So Moth, thank you for noting that. I've had several people comment to me about the OVAs, about the timing, because I said back in episodes 4 through 6 that I was told to maybe watch episode 22.5 after episode 50, and everyone in the comments was like, no, they're all like, please watch it in order. And apparently, according to Kikoro says that after episode 13, there's an OVA for 13.5. It's not on Crunchyroll, but I found it on Bilibili. I looked it up. I was like, 13.5 Kuroko, and Bilibili has the episode. So the hyper organized part of me is kind of glad about that, because next week we could do episodes 13, 13.5, and 14 together, and then we'd have 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 22.5, and then 23, 24, 25, and it would all end evenly, and my soul would be at ease. That would be great, right? So I'm going to put a thing out on Discord asking about it, but because I may record ahead because of the holidays, I may go ahead and record 13, 13.5, and 14 very soon, and ask about those just to be safe. But the majority of people were like, nope, you should watch them in order. And I was like, okay. I wondered, because Crunchyroll listed them in order, and I was like, does that seem intentional? But then again, like the Attack on Titan OVAs, a few of them are out of place, but you really need to see season 2 before you watch like one of the OVAs that happens in season 1. And so I was like, is that the case? But it may be different. So there's that. RG Wright talked about how Kuroko's school that he goes to is actually a private school, like Kisei's. It's just not as nice. And when he said that, I was like, or they said that, I was like, that makes sense. Because when they were doing the little college, back to school thing of getting people in the clubs, it had kind of, I don't know how else to describe it. It had a private school feel to it. Just like here's our linguistic art club, or it just had a feel. And so when they said that it was a private school, I'm like, nope, that checks out. It's just not as maybe well funded as Kisei's. So yeah, finally, I have been asked by a couple people now if I would react to the character songs for season 1. Which is funny, because I've reacted to the character songs for Donghua, like The Untamed. And so I was like, sure. Okay. So, and I've reacted to songs for Attack on Titan. So I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. So I guess after season 1, I'll react to the character songs for season 1 before we start season 2. Seems like an idea. That sounds fun to me. I'm kind of all about it. That'll be a fun little video. So we'll go with that, but okay. But yeah, those are my comments, and I'm pretty excited and ready to start episodes 10 through 12. When we last left off, the game was going okay, but Kagami's getting a little riled up, especially because of our baldy guy on the other team, on Seiho's team. And so Kuroko was like, I got this. So I'm really curious to see, how does Kuroko have this? How is he going to fight without Kagami there? I guess he could use the second years like Hyuga and them, but they're all afraid that Kagami's going to foul out, which fair enough. Kagami probably would. So, and they need him against Midorima. So I'm very curious to see how Kuroko is going to handle this on his own. Don't know. But that's what we're here to find out. So we are going to start Kuroko Basketball episodes 10 through 12, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Well, I'm glad we're touching on Kagami being a little bit self-centered and has thinking the same as the Generation of Miracles. I'm glad we're touching on it now and not waiting till like later on in the series. Although I wonder if it's going to be like a touch and go thing between him and Kuroko of Kagami wrestling with the fact of being strong versus being reliable. And so I think that we'll talk about that when we get to episode 12. But man, these episodes were brutal. I was like, Midorima is just, him and Takao together, they're a brutal combination. I'm like, oh my God. I was just sitting there like, what do we do? And then the series does a great job of making you feel the despair of being so far behind, and then them slowly whittling their way back up. If you've ever watched basketball, and not professional basketball, because like the NBA and stuff, I don't feel like, it's funny. My dad and I were talking about this. My dad is not a basketball guy. He's a football guy. and my mom coached basketball for years. And I told my dad, I was like, watching NBA is fun. It's just kind of like a big show. But I love watching college ball and high school basketball much more than I do professional basketball, because I feel like there's so much stakes, and it's just like you don't know what's going to happen. You can feel the tension so much more. And I always loved watching basketball games where a team is like 20 points behind and they slowly whittle it back to 11 points and then to 8 points, and you're just rooting for them. You're like, you can do it. You can whittle that down if you try. And Siren's trying, but man, it makes a difference. I can't imagine playing 2 games in a row. No, the energy you have to play one game, even though it's 40 minutes, it's by the time you do timeouts, by the time you do fouls, by the time you do, and there's not even been a lot of fouling in this game, not really. Which maybe that's just, maybe that Japanese basketball is not really as foul heavy as American basketball is. But I don't know. But yeah, like by the time you account for timeouts and fouls and substitutions, it's definitely more than 40 minutes per game. But you're just so like intense, right? Just running. You're like a running. Like a lot of basketball people I knew were like also cross country runners because they needed to have stamina and like build up that strength to just run a court for hours on end. So yeah, I can't imagine. But man, what I like about this series so far is that Kuroko and Kagami and them, they're not invincible. And even Midorima, who seems invincible, is not invincible. And they find a way to counter him that makes sense. And so that part's a lot of fun. But Takao's like the most OP one in this series, honestly. Like Midorima has a weakness, but Takao's just like, I just show up and do things. And it's like, what the hell? Takao is like insanely good. And I did not expect that from a guy that was carrying Midorima on a cart 6 episodes ago. I was like, but let's talk about these episodes. So I took a lot of notes. I did front and back notes for this one. So I took a lot, and I'm going to hopefully be able to read my handwriting. But episode 10 with Tsugawa. I kept forgetting what Tsugawa's name was, so I'd say Baldy or something. I'm like, what is his name? But Tsugawa. But Kuroko. I like that Kuroko's underestimated. They really underestimated him, right? Which figures they don't have a Generation of Miracles player on their team that would have known Kuroko from personal experience. So they know you can't underestimate Kuroko. He's hyper competitive, but in the quietest of ways. It's kind of amazing. I like it a lot. But I also like how they figured out Seiho's tricks from the video. I'm like, did nobody else watch the videos and figure this out? Midorima and them did. I guess maybe they did, and if Seiho had faced Shotoku, they would have figured out and done the same, but just Kuroko's team got to it first. But they figured out their tricks of the video. Again, now that I say it, now that it was pointed out that Kuroko school is a private school, definitely is, because them TVs look like nice TVs, and a public school ain't got that. At least not in America. No, maybe Japanese public schools are different, but we got a cart. Not one mounted to the wall and be like an LED TV and everything. But there's a big talk in episode 10 about the old style versus new style in basketball. Kasamatsu brought it up, so did a few other players. But that's actually talked about. It's kind of a big point in Slam Dunk, is that Inoue, who wrote Slam Dunk, was starting to integrate new NBA styles into play, and kind of phasing out some of the old traditional ways of playing basketball and phasing in these new techniques, new things. And I feel like that happens in every sport. Like we were talking in Ace of the Diamond, how new MLB strategies would get brought in, much to Miyuki's chagrin, and how they would be integrated. And there's kind of a push and pull of whether that's okay or not. But Kasamatsu and them was like, no, the modern style is coming into play and it's shutting out the older style. So I kind of like that. I like this idea that Shohoku is a fresh new, or not Shohoku, as I wear that shirt, but Siren is a fresh new school that is utilizing the modern play, and is and it wins over the more tried and true old school methods. So that's interesting, right? But yeah, Seiho, they tried really hard in those last seconds. They pushed Siren to the limit, and it sucks that Siren got pushed so hard because Shotoku really didn't. And they managed to win. Hyuga scoring the 3 to win it was just, I love it. I love Hyuga as the second year scoring the 3 to win, 73-71. I was like, that was so good. I like that it wasn't it was down to the buzzer, but it wasn't a 1-point win. It was a good solid 2-point win. I'm like, I liked that. And then Tsugawa not being able to take Seiho's loss was really fascinating. That he was so distraught. He's like, well, why is this? You're a team that started last year. How can you be a team that beat a tried and true 19-year qualifying champion team? And that's such a cool argument because you see it happen in so many sports, and not even athletic like sports like volleyball or basketball or anything, but even like in competitive speech, which is what I competed in college. But I remember there was a college that started a new program, and they were brand new, but they had like coaches that were really excited. Like they had coaches that were really good in speech themselves. So they came to this team to like build it from the ground up. They got in a bunch of freshmen that were like really awesome and talented. And the first couple of years of their program, they weren't great because they were getting started. But like 2 or 3 years in, they were like making it at nationals, like being in the top 5. Like, and everybody was like, what is this new school? Where'd it come from? We're like this pristine university with all this reputation. And that school is just like, nah, we just brought it and came to win and don't care about your reputation or your legacy. We just got game, we're going to do it. And I kind of respect that. I love that about Siren, that they're a new team. They're not like in sports anime, you have like the powerhouse schools, and you also have like the established schools that have the reputations. And Siren doesn't have that. Like Riko's their coach. Like she's, a student herself. So it's kind of cool. Or maybe she's a student. I think she's a student. But is she? Yeah, she is. She's attending school there. Her and Hyuga are in the same class. Sometimes I feel like she's older, and I'm like, has she already graduated? But she's not. But yeah, they're this new school, and I kind of love that. But when Tsugawa's like, well, we practiced more and we're stronger, it's like, how do you know you practiced more? How do you know that? And the coach shuts him down. The captain of their team shuts him down. And I love that he's like, the strong don't win. The winners are strong. I'm like, it's so cheesy, but it's so good. It's great. Yeah. And then, of course, Tsugawa's like, I'm not going to forget you. It would be really ironic if we had a future episode and Kuroko shows up and Tsugawa forgot him. That would be really funny. I'd laugh pretty hard at that. Speaking of which, I'm sorry, but this anime, there's just something so fresh and absolutely hilarious about the fact that every time a character is having this big emotional breakdown, they're just like, you don't understand. You're like, nah. It's like the woman being held back in the meme from the cat. You cut over to Kuroko and he's just like, what? Like, it just so his eyes are like dead fish eyes. He looks like a goldfish just bobbling on the surface, like dead-eyed. And it's the funniest damn thing because you'll cut over, like, this person will be like snot spitting, like having this big dramatic breakdown, and you cut over to Kuroko and he's like, I'm sorry. It's so wonderful. But I'm sorry, when they beat Seiho and Riko, she was starting to cry, and Hyuga's like head pats her and he's like, not yet. It's not time to cry yet. I was like, I know some people in the comments have been like, they don't ship Hyuga and Riko, but I'm like, I'm like, Hyuga and Riko have basketball playing babies and go for it. I'm like, I'm ready. They're so good together. I love it. And so yeah, Shitoku, meanwhile, wiped the floor with Genbo 113-38. Like, didn't even try. They were just like, what? They gave up like in the third quarter. But Midorima, I find it interesting that Midorima he's so focused on Kuroko and Kagami. Like, he's super hyper focused. And it's great. Riko is giving all to the manager. What is this? We're giving all massages. I was like, I can't read my own handwriting. I was just sitting there like furiously typing notes. She's giving them all massages after the game to get their calves and stuff worked out. Gonna note, she gave Hyuga the first massage. Just putting it out there. Just saying. Just gonna throw it out there. But I love Kagane has the bananas. He's like, there's always like a sports anime character that's eating a banana after the game because it's got potassium. You're supposed to eat it. Keep your energy up. It's got sugar. And so he's just sitting there. He brought like a whole thing of bananas. He's like, here you go. I don't know if he gave them out to everybody, but he brought them. And then Kagame's resting. And Hyuga's like, he's not asleep. He's just conserving his energy. And the moment Takao noticed Kuroko in the bathroom, it was like, oh. Takao is such a cool character. He's so intriguing. He sounds like Makoto. If Makoto was like a badass boss, I'm like, when did Makoto get this dark, sinister voice? I'm kind of in love with it. I'm like, okay. But Takao is like so intimidating. He's really fierce. And I love him. But yeah, and of course, the keepers, Kuroko is Kagami's keeper, Takao is Midorima's keeper, and they all have to like exit the locker rooms in couples at the same time, like you do. But yeah, Midorima, he's going through everything. He's like, I've not missed any shots. I've gone to practice each day. I taped my left hand and had perfect nail care. Today's horoscope said it was #1 for cancer. I brought the raccoon toy Shigaraki, which, by the way, that is terrifying. It looks like something that would be in a 80-year-old cat lady's home. But that being said, I want it. I want Shigaraki the raccoon. If y'all find one, send it my way. I want a Shigaraki. I want to put it on the shelf. I want to put it on the shelf, like, I don't know, right there. I want to put it right there by my stuff, a Shigaraki little raccoon figurine. If you find one, just feel free to send it my way, but that is amazing. And so I like in the locker room, and he's like, oh yeah, his laces were tied on the right side of his shoes. Like, he's gone through all the motions. He's done everything he could to be as lucky as possible. It's very psychoschematic. Like, do I believe that the luck is really what makes Midorima do well? No, it's the practice and his talent, but it's all kind of psychoschematic where he has convinced himself that he needs all the luck on his side. And it's like, okay, sure, you do you. But I like that the captain of Shotoku, he's very much like, let's not underestimate Siren. I like that. Takao's kind of like, oh, whatever, brush him off. But the captain's like, no, let's not underestimate them. Very captain-like, right? And I love, he's like, the first thing was only an upset. He's like, no matter if it's a rabbit or a tiger, which makes me think like Kuroko and Kagami. Kagami's the tiger, Kuroko's the rabbit. And he's like, no matter what, we're lions and we'll crush them all. I'm like, okay, Jaime Lannister. The Lannisters send their regards. And they sent their regards in episode 11. Oh my God, what a bloodbath. We'll get to it. But yeah, and so then we cut to Hyuga, who's exhausted. And he's just like, I was really melancholy this morning. Didn't think we were going to make it this far. I'm tired. I was like, Hyuga is the most realistic captain speech. But what I like by the end of it, he's like, look, this is as far as we can go. This is the qualifier. It's the finals. If we make it, we make it. He's like, so let's do it. He's like, let's do this. He's like, we've saved up all our energy for this. There is no next game. This is the qualifier. And then we go from here. And it's like, okay, cool. That's great. And so we can go all out. And Midorima having he kind of has the foreshadowing of what Kagami is going to think later on. Because Midorima's like, oh, any team can fight as long as they work together. That's an illusion. Again, the Generation of Miracles mentality is that it's like Inashiro from Ace of the Diamond on steroids. They're a team of individuals that just happen to be working together. And they're just really, really talented. And he's like, that's an illusion. And so he wants to show how foolish Kuroko's decision was. And I like that Kuroko, again, answers like with his dead shark eyes. He's like, there is no right answer. He's like, you can't tell me my answer's wrong or right. You don't know. It's not a test. There's no answer key. And then he's like, you don't know me. You don't know why I made the choices I made. I was just like, Kuroko's like, don't judge me. Come at me, bro. And so, and Midorima looks like he just can't stand the cuteness and savagery of Kuroko. I love his expressions in these episodes. And he's also not impressed with Kagami. He's like, that's who you went to school for? Okay. And then, meanwhile, I love that Kagami's getting all worked up and Hyuga's like, let's not start anything. There's an expression that Hyuga gives in that episode where he's like, Kagami, I was really thinking Kagami might get in some foul trouble in this episode, but he really only has one foul. And that was when he slapped the ball out of the guy's hand. I'm like, oh, that's a foul. Yeah, you got to hit the ball, not the hand. And so I'm like, no, that doesn't work, right? So Midorima made the comment about, he's like, oh, Kuroko, you found a new light, which means he had an old light. So which one is it, right? Because it's not Midorima. It's not Kisei, right? Because if this series is going to maximize that drama and BL shippability to the max. I don't want to know the answer, by the way. Do not say in the comments, oh, it's this person that has his new light. Please don't do that. That's like a giant spoiler. I'm going to figure it out. So let me figure it out when it comes. But I am really excited by the prospect that Kuroko has a former player, probably of the Generation of Miracles, that was his light, and that failed immensely. So my personal opinion is it's the redhead. I think the redhead was his light, And that's the one, because it says the red hair like Kagami. I think it's going to be him. I think he'll be the last Generation of Miracles person we meet, but because he's going to be the one most like Kagami, and there's going to be that comparison, right? That's my theory, but I don't want to be confirmed or deconfirmed. Let me wait it out and find out if I'm going to be right or not, all right? And so, and Kuroko, that whole thing, God, Midorima's 3, by the end of episode 10, Midorima's 3, and then when Kuroko's like, keep running, he's like, go back, I'm going to throw it right to you. Kuroko could have been a pitcher. His voice actor is Raichi in Ace of the Diamond, who does have the ability to pitch and is super powerful in his pitching. Not as controlled, but super powerful. So, fitting, right? Oh, but then we have episode 11 and 12. Mm-hmm. Episode 11 is brutal. It was hard to watch. It was really hard to watch. I was like, Takao is made to mark Kuroko. And Kelsey in the Discord was talking about how Kuroko, and in the comments on Patreon, how Kuroko doesn't really explain the rules of basketball. They don't. That is the one thing that's like, if you don't know anything about basketball, you might be like, what are they talking about? They throw out some lingo. What does that mean? If you don't know, and I'm going by my very limited basketball knowledge from childhood, but when you mark somebody, you can either do, they talked about, you do the different types of defenses. You can either do like an area defense where you pick an area and you just defend that area, or you mark someone, you claim someone on the court that you're going to follow and you're going to keep them from scoring or getting the ball. And so Takao was marking somebody else, but then he was made to mark Kuroko and be on him during the game. And the coach knows that Takao is excellent at passing. He's not affected by Kuroko's misdirection, so that's why he puts him in. I want to say the coach has Ochiai's voice actor. Maybe I might look that up afterwards and see for the next set of episodes if that's the case. But it sounded a lot like him. And so Kisei, I love that Kisei's standing up most of these episodes. He's just like on his feet, like, and he's rooting for Siren. He's like, come on, Siren. Like, Kisei wants Kuroko-chi to do the best that he can. And it's awesome. I love Kisei. But yeah, and Midorima's shot, I mean, it comes at a price. So they talk about what Midorima's weakness is. That, yeah, he can shoot from literally anywhere, but it gives his team, it takes a while for the shot to go because there's so much arc to it. And so because of that, it gives the other team an advantage to get set up for when it hits, like what Kuroko did. But also, because he has such a wide range with his shot, it takes him longer to set it up and make it work. So if you time it right, you can theoretically block it, which Kagami does. So I like that these special abilities that the players have are not infallible. There is a way to work around. You just got to figure out what it is. And so, yeah, but oh my gosh, Takao, he's just a solid, good player. Like, just really good. I'm like, okay, Takao's just awesome. Nice. And I like that he kind of, even after he monologues to Kuroko about them being so similar, Kuroko's like, okay. It's just so great. But Takao has like the eagle eye of Izuki, but of course better because they're the opposing team. Why wouldn't they be? And so Midorima, he doesn't like Kuroko because he respects him. I really liked this part here. He says that Kuroko has no strengths and he can't do anything on his own. Which is funny because that's why Kuroko, he clings to the idea of teamwork because Kuroko knows that he can't do anything on his own, but he also knows that they have to work together as a team. And it's kind of in direct contrast to where Kagami is in episode 12. So I like that. I like that we talk about that. But he also points out that even though he didn't have any strengths, and could not work on his own, he was the reason they were victorious. He led them to victory. And he says that his abilities, meaning he has more than one. So I'm excited by that. I'm like, oh, Kuroko has more up his sleeve than just this passing business, or there's super passes or crazy passes or something different with that. So I'm excited. But he's like, his abilities are nothing like ours. His strengths, again, plural, are another kind. But he chose to, quote unquote, bury himself with a team that cannot fully utilize his abilities. So that's what Midoriya is. That's what Midorima's kick is. He's like, this guy is so talented, but he's wasting it on a team that can't unlock his full potential. And I'm like, well, if Kagami gets good enough and Hyuga's pretty solid, maybe they can. You don't know Midorima. Maybe they can. So, yeah. And Kuroko, he's really sad in this moment. on the bench, but Kagami's supportive of him. He's like, gives him the head rub. He's like, oh, come on, Kuroko, we can do this. And Riko telling Hyuga we have the flashback of Riko and Hyuga, and she's like, you are going to smash one of your toys, one of your collectible shoguns for every shot you miss. And he does it. I was like, oh, Hyuga. Oh, man. I love that shot where he's just crying at her feet like, why? And she's like, mm-hmm. He's like, okay, coach. It's great. But she kept a little piece of it, though. So I'm hoping we come back to that because she kept a little fan. I'm hoping we come back to that moment, especially if they lose. I hope we come back to that and talk about it because I think that'll be relatively important. But of course, Midorima can make a half-court shot. He can make a whole court shot, too. Why are we surprised? And the half court makes 11-16. And Riko, justifyingly, is worried about the team's morale. She's like, this is bad. So it's like, yes, it is. It's very bad. And she's like, I don't know what we should do. And so Midorima asks if he can make all the shots. He just wants to shut them down. He's like, I want to crush their morale. And here's the thing. Very much like in Inashiro, or I feel like in Haikyuu, there's not really a self-centered team in Haikyuu. They all work pretty well. I mean, they have Shiratorizawa, who mainly is Ushijima, but they're pretty well-rounded teams for the most part. But and that's Haikyuu, but in Ace of Diamond, in Inashiro, a lot of times they're like, oh, well, this one person's amazing, so we'll sacrifice a little for the sake of them. And here, when Midorima asks if he can make all the shots, the coach is like, well, you normally just get 3 requests a day, so I'll let you do this, but this is all your requests. I'm like, the team is clearly prioritizing the win over the teamwork, and the teammates are okay with it, but it's like, are they happy playing basketball because of that, or is just Midorima happy? We'll go back to that in episode 12. But the coach is like, okay, fine. And then Kisei, I love how Kisei is so confident in Kuroko. Kisei's like, you got this. You can do this. You've got Midorima beat. Like, Kisei's rooting for him. I love it. But the thing of it is, Kisei does not know Takao. So Kisei is looking at it like, okay, Kuroko could probably maybe take Midorima in a one-on-one battle. And maybe that's what's going to happen in the next episode. Maybe Kuroko's like, let me mark Midorima. And it's going to be like, really? He's going to be like, Kagami gets too worked up about Midorima. Let me guard him. I'll shake things up with him. He's Tsundere. I'll get too close to him and he'll be like, I don't want to. So I'm like, maybe that's it. Maybe Kisei had figured it out. Because Kisei's like, yeah, he's like, Kuroko is the one that like gets under his skin. So maybe that's the way to do it. Because Takao just clearly isn't working. But I'm sorry. This show is such a damn tease. Such a damn tease. We get 2 images of all the Generation of Miracle players together. In the first one, we do see a little bit of the face of the dark blue-haired guy, but to be fair, we see his face in the OP and ED. So that's not surprising. What is surprising is that we see the other players, but then in the second one where Kisei has the ice cream cone, we don't see they're all turned away from the camera. And I'm like, that's so clever and so frustrating. I was like, you wenches, you couldn't show us 1 inch, could ya? But yeah, it's, God, 15-27 in like the end of the first quarter. It's like, ugh, or the end of into the second quarter. And Kisei, there is a conversation in that flashback about where Kisei talks about dunks versus 3-pointers. And Kuroko calls like Midorima a child for arguing with him about it. In Slam Dunk, the argument was that it doesn't matter. Dunks and 3-pointers are fine, but the real skill is in rebounding and passing the ball. That's where the real talent is. And I agree with that. Like when my mom was coaching, it was like, yeah, my mom was always like, it doesn't matter how good of a shooter you are. If you miss, someone has to rebound or you've given the team the ball. She's like, rebounding is like the most important thing. That was always her thing. She was like, defense, rebounding. Get that ball back, score again. It's like a free ball if you rebound. And so that was always her strategy. And I've always like kind of looked at that with Slam Dunk. And so maybe that's going to be the case here. So yeah, but then we have the end of the episode where Kuroko and them are all like they're all kind of dejected, but Kagami is just laughing at the challenge, which makes sense for Kagami. He wants a challenge, but he says later on in episode 12 that he likes a challenge, but he also wants to win. So Kagami's like, I want to be challenged, but I also want to I want to overcome that challenge and win the final, event. Also, man, the cursed ED of Takao with them couples raccoons. Them couples tanukis. What? What is this? What is this end card? I guess we might as well talk about the end cards. The first end card were they were players from Seo's team. Yeah, it was Tsugawa, the one that looks like Discount Light Yagami, and the captain. So that was there's like every team has a Light Yagami in this series, which is hilarious. But yeah, that was the first ED end card for episode 10. Episode 11, I like episode 11's a lot in that it has Takao and Midorima, Feed My Shipper Heart. But this was in the ED. What is that nonsense? Look at Takao's face. What demonic possessed face is that? What is that? But also the couples raccoons, Midorima and Takao. Okay. And then finally the end card for episode 12, fittingly, is Midorima and Kagami, both in the same spotlight, because Kagami acts a little bit like Midorima in this. When Midorima was asking for all the shots in the second half, in the second quarter, and the captain was really peeved about it. He was like, I'm going to beat you up if you keep asking for this. Yeah, Kagami kind of does the same thing. We'll talk about it. Of course, in episode 12, it starts to rain. Because why wouldn't it? In sports anime, when it starts to rain, it's like, it's about to get angsty. Mm-hmm. And sad. And that it does. So, Kisei. I love the Kisei. He's like, show some spirit, Siren. But it is 27-42 at the end of the second. And it's like, oof. And Midorima, he's just not even paying attention. He's like, in the locker room, Midorima's not paying attention. He's worried about his nails. I feel like there might be some bad luck happening in this locker room scene because Midorima's like trying to fix his nails. He's like, oh, something's wrong. And then, okay, this also, as far as being a team goes, Siren's team are a bunch of cinnamon buns. They would be so respectful to each other and their habits and their likenesses and everything. They would be so respectful. With Midorima's team in the locker room, the one guy's come up and they're like, what's this raccoon toy? You made it sit on the bench with us. Midorima's like, that's why we're winning. And they, of course, are like, well, no, let's just break it. I was like, are you kidding? Like, you know how much your teammate is into horoscopes, superstitious things, and good luck charms, and you threaten to break the raccoon? Why? I was just like, I thought for a second they were going to break it and that Midorima would lose his mind. They don't, obviously. But the one guy kicked it. So I'm like, did he cause bad luck by kicking the raccoon? Did he set off a chain of bad luck events? I hope so. I hope in the next episode we get Siren turning around to catch up with Midorima's team. So yeah, Riko wants to cheer them up, but she's like, I offered him a kiss once and that didn't do it. She's like, what more could I do? And I love that Hyuga shut her down. He's like, don't even, he's like, stop. You're trying to cheer us up, but just stop. It's not going to work. Please stop. And then, who taped Takao for Kuroko? What? Did Kuroko just set up a cam on one of the, who taped that? It could have been somebody on the team. Yeah, somehow someone taped Takao for him. But also, I wondered if, I guess maybe we'll find out eventually. It's an unsolved mystery of Kuroko's basketball. But I thought, when he was talking about going through the tape, what I thought was that when he sat the bench for the first part of the second half, that he was going to be watching Takao to see how he could counter him. And maybe that's when he's got this idea that he brings up at the end of the episode. So we'll see. But yeah, so Kuroko, I like that Kuroko goes to this idea that he's thought of winning before, but he never thought that there'd be a time where he'd win or lose. He's like, I've thought about winning, but it's never crossed my mind whether I'd win or lose in a match. He's just in it to have fun. And to play for fun. That's what he loves doing. And he's competitive. He wants to win, but it's not the end of his world, right? He would rather play and be happy than be on a team that's like, winning is everything. He'd rather be on a team that's playing basketball is fun. And you got to respect Kuroko for that. And so, but the thing of it is, he talks about in his monologue there, he's like, I've always wondered, I thought of winning, but I've never, wondered if we'd win or lose. He's like, what if at the very last second a meteor comes and takes out the other team? What was the point of worrying? And I kind of reacted to that moment in the episode because in Haikyuu, there's a character named Sakusa, Kiyumi Sakusa, who has kind of a very similar speech during a match in Haikyuu. It's the same meteor concept. It's like if a meteor came and struck and hit the world, how would it affect things? And then what would have been important at that time? So I thought that was really interesting because Kuroko's basically saying, he's like, we can't predict the future. We don't know how the game's going to end. So there's no point in getting stressed about it. Let's just have fun and try to win the best we can. And so Kagami is super quiet during most of this game. Like, he's not talking hardly at all. And we find out that Leos and Cancers are not compatible, which makes sense because, you know, Cancer's a water sign, Leo's a fire sign, right? So it makes sense they're not compatible. And I feel like Megami, his luck is just edging and waning out just a little bit more and more as the episode goes on. But Kagami, he figures out that he can block Midorima, and he spends the entire rest of the episode trying to block him and finally succeeds. And our boy can jump. That is his special ability, is he can jump. And what I like about that is that Rico and them sat him on defense. And I'm like, yes, if he can jump, he can rebound. He can block shots. He can, you know, if he can jump really high, he can try to get the ball from others, knock it out. That's a defensive skill. So I'm glad they realized that about him early on. But Kagami starts to lament that he's not strong enough. And we have the big shot of him in the rain. Of course we do, where he's been practicing by himself. And there is part of this that I kind of get what Kagami's doing. What Kagami's doing is that he's like, I have been to the point where I've been relying on Kuroko. I need to get to the point where I don't have to rely on him. And I respect that. I respect that he's like, I don't want to have to depend on anybody. I want to be able to do it myself. But there is a distinct difference between wanting to be able to do it yourself and not wanting anyone to help you. There's a big difference with that. And so he doesn't want to have to rely on Kuroko or anyone. He just wants to get stronger. But he lets it get to his head, right? And he calls when he called for the ball from Kagami, I was like, oh no. And Kagani's like, what? What are we doing? And Kuroko gets it. He understands what's going down, right? And Kagami's like, we need to win. It's not team ball. And that moment on the bench where they punched each other, you felt those punches. Those like looked like they hurt. It wasn't like a slap. It was like, oh my God, that punch was a thing. But yeah, he's like, well, we need to win. It's not team ball. And Kuroko's like, no. He's like, the whole point of me playing at this school is because I thought you were different than what I played with. It's like, get your BL goggles on for the angst. Mm-hmm. All aboard the angst train. Because yeah, Kuroko's like, I quit the Generation Miracles because all they cared about was winning and basketball wasn't fun anymore. And he's like, you're starting to sound just like them. Why did I come to school if it's not going to be fun anymore? And you're going to drag the team down. It's like, oof. And he's like, you can't play by yourself. You're thinking like the Generation Miracles instead of beating them. And then Kagami punches back. And I was like, damn, that looked like it hurt. Saying that we have to win. And Kuroko's like, well, then what's victory? Because eventually you're going to lose. So do you either win and forego all happiness and love of the activity, or do you sometimes lose but still have a good time, be happy, and care for the sport? And I will say, Kagami, he kind of comes back down to reality real quick, like super quick. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is something that we deal with Kagami with through a lot of the seasons, is if Kagami is constantly trying to find that balance of, I want to be reliable and not have to rely on others, but I also need to be a team player. Because there is that delicate balance of being reliable, but also being able to be there and to work hard and be a team player in it. So we'll see. But yeah, and so Kagami, he breaks the awkward silence. Kagani's like, that's right. It's like, oh my gosh, thank you. Because it was really awkward there for a moment. And then, but the score is 47-61, which is not bad. It's only like 14 points behind. It's better than it seems. But they're like, what do we do? We're 14 points behind. And the Croak was like, well, I didn't want to tell you all this, but I could take it up another level. Maybe. So I don't know. I think he's going to guard Midorima. He's going to mark him, but I don't know. It might be something else. And then even if he does guard Midorima, what are we going to do with that? How's that going to change things? So I don't know. But I'm really, really excited to see what happens in these next episodes. We're entering the fourth quarter, so I feel like the game is about to end, but I don't know. I'm like, we're only 12 episodes into the first season. We're almost halfway through the first season. But I'm like, this sports anime, it is not messed around. It's just like firing through the plot. And I'm like, part of me is like, I want to say they're going to win because we're only 12 episodes in and we need to get ready for like nationals and stuff like that. And we could spend the rest of the season playing at we could spend the rest of the season playing nationals, and the season could maybe end with them winning or losing. It's season 1, so they're probably going to lose at some point. And then Kuroko and then will become second years, and Hyuga and then will become third years, and that's the rest of the seasons for those. Maybe. But I don't know. A part of me is like, I want them to win, but then another part of me is like, they could lose. So I don't know. I don't know. So yeah, I'm very curious to know your thoughts down below. Please no spoilers, hints, or clues. But I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care. And yeah, I'll be back next week with episodes 13, 13.5, and 14 of Kuroko's Basketball. Bye.